So I'll start by saying these are frightening times, a point that was emphasised by the University College of London academic Bill Maguire in a Guardian article about the launch of his latest book, Hot House Earth, which he issued a very, very stark warning. He said there is no chance that we can avoid a perilous, all-pervasive climate breakdown. One that's going to be ever more marked by ever more ferocious heat waves. Now, I'm not a scientist, but when I think of the scorching weather we've endured over the past few weeks and the harm that's been done to people's health, to the environment, I've got to think he really has got a point. And if we don't act and do it in a meaningful way, in the soonest possible time, as Professor Maguire put it, a child born in 2020 will face a far more hostile world than the one its grandparents knew. Some people have argued that when people make claims like that, they're playing to the gallery, possibly trying to engage in intention of a sometimes jaded public. But I do think he's got a point when he says we, the public, need to properly understand how bad the situation could get if we were to have any hope of turning it around. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is from a very much non-specialist perspective, what the Green Party believe needs to be done to start that process. And I should hasten to add, it's not a party political broadcast. This is an issue far more important than just going out to get ourselves more seats in the council chambers across the county or in 6,000 in Westminster. This is a genuine existential crisis that will blight the lives of our children and grandchildren in ways that nothing we have known in history has done so before. But at the heart of what we want to do is a single key question, and that is, what sort of world do we want to hand on to future generations, to our children and to our grandchildren? We believe it is one that is shaped by our having taken important but sometimes difficult decisions that we know are the right thing to do. Like changing our relationship with the land, moving from exploiting to caring for nature. Doing this by making the way we produce our food more sustainable, by using rewilding to restore damaged landscapes, to bring nature into the hearts of our towns and cities. Because a lot of people, tragically, don't have access to green spaces, and during the hard years of the pandemic that we just lived through, really suffered both physical and mental well-being deficits as a result. Building an education system that has nature at its heart, not in a fluffy, sentimentalist way. We're not going to be Fotherington Thomas saying hello to the clouds and the trees. We want it because we want children to understand the natural world, to have respect for it, and we want them to be the next generation that are going to lead the change and create a green economy that will give a better quality of life to everybody. We also want to create strong ecocide laws, and if you read anything about corporate crimes and crimes against the environment, the misuse by some corporations of their power and the spineless responses to it of government, and sometimes the active collusion of government, and we're not talking governments abroad in countries of dubious democratic records, we're talking here in the United Kingdom. We need strong laws and we need agencies that are funded properly to go out there and enforce these laws. Now, these are not just election policies, those are the core values. They've been at the heart of what the Green Party stands for since it was founded in the early 1970s. In North Staffordshire, under myself and under my predecessor as co-ordinator, We have worked hard to put these values into practice over the past 2 years. We've done this by working with a great local charity in Stoke-on-Trent called, and elsewhere in the county called, Better Together, to help create a community garden up in Clayton at a primary school. It allows young children to learn where the food comes from, to have the experience of growing their own food, cooking their own food, and it also helps them to understand what we need to do to protect nature. And we're going to carry on working on similar projects. I'm having a conversation with the Chief Executive of Better Together. We can work together to help them out with the great work they do very, very early. We've stood with protesters at Wally's Quarry. We took part in the marches we helped to organise the last march to Newcastle Town Centre, when I would say around 300 people stood in Queen's Garden to call out Red Industries for their bad corporate behaviour. I'm very proud to have spoken that day, and I'm very proud to have met great people behind that campaign who have united genuine scientific research done as members of the community with genuine community activism, with real credit. So where you might ask in this is Europe. Well, I'm proud to say that the Green Party backs the European Union, backs Britain's membership of the Union. We always have. I'm also proud to say that I have always backed our membership of the European Union. I voted for us to stay in, and I have always been completely honest with people on election platforms and said that's how I voted. And to be honest, I think a lot of people now are coming to realise we made a bad decision back in 2016. So obviously I back you with my eyes open. Like any political system, it isn't perfect. A lot of our institutions aren't perfect, but we have, in the Green Party, we have ideas about how you might change that and make our democracy more representative, but don't necessarily fall underneath the remit of what I'm going to say tonight. But I do believe that our membership of the European Union, which I hope we're going to work to regain, is the best way we can work together as citizens of this country, as citizens of Europe, and as citizens of the world to challenge the terrible risks that are ahead, and I think to find better and fairer solutions that make the world a better and fairer place for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the talk, Adam. It was very good. It's always good to hear, I think, someone from especially from the Green Party, talk about environmental issues. You know how that links into Europe. It's very pertinent to what we're all facing at the moment. We've got time for a quick Q&A. If anyone has any questions.
Take questions yet? Well, I'm not a scientist. My degree was in sociology, so but I'll happily try to answer questions as best I can.
Fantastic, and I really appreciate that. Has anyone got any questions for Adam?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to go ahead, Hugh?
Yeah. I wondered if Adam was aware of the Staffordshire Wildlife Trust's nature recovery programme.
Absolutely. Yes, we are, and we wrote to Stoke-on-Trent City Council, pushing them to do a proper audit of our natural habitats and to take action on it. And we're going to be pushing them at the next council meeting. I've got 2 public questions down, which hopefully I'm going to be asking supplementaries on that exact point.
Yeah, you can tell them that Lichfield District Council has put forward a declaration.
Absolutely. That's the model I use in the letter I wrote to Councillor Edwards at Stoke-on-Trent. I cited Lichfield Council and the plan they put together.
Get him to talk to Councillor Angela Vax in Lichfield if he wants more information.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. It's nice when we make those connections, these kind of meetings, isn't it, to help each other out. It's very, very good. Thanks, you. Is there any more questions for Adam?
I agree with you about working together, and being in the EU would be beneficial to climate campaigning and environmental campaigning, because obviously there's no borders involved in what the issues we're facing are. But we don't seem able to attract people into helping us, who we see joining things like the Green Movement and the Extinction Rebellion and all the others, particularly the young people. How can we best get the synergies so that we can help each other, do you think?
I think it is tough. You know, we need to attract younger members to the Green Party. I have to say, perhaps sometimes because we are a political party, we take the political approach should be building a reasoned argument, going presenting that, keeping on presenting that until you start to get some traction. Sometimes having a young person yourself, I know that's a bit, you know, a little bit too slow for the young, and they like maybe more direct methods taken by FR. But I think we can work together, you know, and I'm happy to try and work with you on attracting people to Europe and supporting the European Union. I think a lot of young people are very pro-European. So I'm happy to work with you on that. If you want to message me, email me later in the week, I'm happy to meet with you or talk with you on the phone, and we can discuss it further.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I imagine campaigning for like rejoining the EU and environmental issues is probably quite similar in some ways, because I think, and I'm good with this as well, that there's a bit of a disconnect in there. Some people don't always see the link between what they're doing and how that impacts the environment. I suppose, like, you know, I don't need to recycle this cardboard or this plastic, and one bottle isn't going to hurt. Or, you know, similarly, people might not realise inflation, how Brexit's impacted that in some way, and it's sometimes difficult to get those people to see those links between the two. I imagine you have the same difficulties, Adam, with the environment. You know,
certainly. Well, you know, when we talk about something like recycling, I think as a country we love to make it difficult. I mean, I can't understand why every council, even when, you know, a street split between two different councils, as in fact there's a lot of places being so continental, Newcastle and Line, have two completely different recycling systems. It just seems bizarre. You know, we need to start making things simpler. I think we need to talk to people in the language you understand, which is not patronising people. We have to relate it to their lives. We have to relate how if we had a greener economy, there'd probably be a lot of better paying jobs. We have to work to put ourselves in a position to do that. And there's significant traction in the trade union movement now towards green jobs, which is great, because the left hasn't always, because a lot of trade unions are always out of old metal bashing industries, you know, in the mines and where they didn't necessarily have the greatest record of environmental care. But I think now the trade union movement is starting to come towards us, and I think we're starting to draw together the synergies between things like the cost of living crisis and the fact that we don't have a sustainable economy. Capitalism just doesn't work anymore. It's the neoliberal capitalism we've worked with for the past 40 odd years. It's just not working. It's become a danger to people, and I think parties like the Greens, we're putting forward an alternative. We know it's a slog to get that message across, but we've been doing it for 50 years, really, and we're going to carry on doing it for another 50 years, by which time I think the political landscape will hopefully look a lot different. We want to foster in the Green Party is a more collegiate form of politics, where we actually sit down, work together to solve problems, rather than engaging in sometimes silly public school debating society antics go on in the Palace of Westminster. You know, I mean, I sit watching PMQs and I think, really, do I want to listen to a very talented lawyer and a public school clown whacking witticism across two swords length of plush carpets at each other? I don't. I want us to sit down and say, right, how do we sort the problems out? Because that's what people do in real life. That's what people do in jobs, in families, in communities. Because you know that's how you solve the problem.
Fantastic, Adam. Thank you again. Before I introduce our next speaker, can I ask that if those are not on mute, they can go on mute. I'm getting quite a lot of background noise. If you don't know where the mute button is on Zoom, it's in the bottom left-hand corner. Oh, thank you a lot. You got on mute. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so our next speaker is Phil Bennion, who's a local farmer and was a MEP for the Liberal Democrats. And he's going to be doing a talk on the future of food and farming. Phil, are you okay to start?
Yes, I was going to. Basically, it was. I think the question I was asked was, how has Brexit really affected farmers particularly in a negative way? Now, I'm going to have to sort of improvise because I've been at the minor injuries unit for several hours because I've done something in my ligaments in my leg today. And I only got back in a few minutes before we started. So you'll have to forgive me on that in that respect. Firstly, I just want to say thanks to Adam for his remarks because there's very, very little of what he said that I would disagree with. But I think one thing that needs to be added is one of the reasons why we were able to have so much higher environmental standards in the EU and lead the world was largely because of the size of the marketplace that could also insulate itself against lower standards. Going it alone, you soon find that everybody starts complaining that the international competition is too great and they can't afford the standards. But when you're a marketplace as big as the EU, you can pretty well do what you want. And I think that's one of the things that we're finding out now is that we can't, as the UK alone, in a lot of respects, do what we want. And but as part of the EU, we could set the pace, whether it's addressing climate change or trying to make farming more sustainable, which is a challenge in itself. And these things are all linked. So I think that big marketplace did give us the power to basically tackle these really major global issues head on. And I think that we missed that already. But really, I mean, let's just. I'll now turn to my core theme, which was Brexit and farming and what's happened. And one of the things I will say, it didn't have to be as bad as the government has taken it, because farming could have dealt with Brexit, I think, reasonably easily if Brexit had been a very, very soft Brexit. And there's an awful lot of people out there who are farming that voted for Brexit who didn't think it was going to be like this. I'm not one of them. I spent a lot of 2016 travelling around, taking on the likes of Owen Paterson in one-to-one debates as a speaker for Stronger In. So as you can probably work out, having been an MEP not just recently, but from before 2014 as well, that I'm very, very pro-European, and I see this the pro-European argument as one. Largely, it's the geopolitical thing, which includes addressing climate change, which is what drives me to saying that that running things those things that are really at that big level, at a European level, is the way to influence the way the world goes, not to wander off into a cul-de-sac. The things that have affected farmers most, well, the obvious big one is the ending of the BPS, the Basic Payment Scheme. We've already lost about, I think, 20% now, and it's going to be reduced down to zero in another 4 years' time. Whereas our European competitors still get the area payments. Now, when it was first announced, when it was under Gove's, when Gove was the minister, a lot of people thought, "Oh, this sounds good. Let's pay the farmers for environmental goods instead of just paying them for farming the area." But I'm one person who's been through this about 4 times, and you come up across the same problem every time. It's against World Trade Organization rules to do what Gove wanted to do. And so basically we gave up in 1993, we made massive concessions to the Cairns Group, the big commodity producers, that, okay, we could pay farmers as much in environmental schemes as we wanted to as governments, but we could only pay them as much as it cost the farmer. So what does that mean in real terms? It means that Gove's idea of replacing the basic payment scheme, which basically supported farm incomes over the sort of fluctuations which we see, was going to go. And if I, for instance, with a medium-sized farm, was getting about £25,000 a year, but I could still get my £25,000 as long as I spent £25,000, which means I'm basically unsupported. Now, unsupported agriculture, okay, it might just be able to make a living, but only if you're running 600, 700, 800 acres. Now, I pointed out to Gove at the time, if I'm running 800 acres alone to make about £20,000, £30,000 a year, I'm going to want big machines because I'm going to want to supplement my income doing other things. I don't want hedges in the way, and I don't want freestanding trees in the way. And I haven't got time to think about doing environmental schemes because I'm going to have to harvest this stuff quick, because basically taking all that money out of agriculture, the only possible response is massive demanning. And a demand agriculture can't deliver environmental schemes. I've been delivering countryside stewardship now for 35 years. I'm just coming up the end of my 35th successive year delivering environmental schemes under the pillar 2 of the Common Agricultural Policy. So I know something about this, and it's we do it largely because we felt grateful for getting the basic payment, which actually underpinned our businesses, and we wanted to do a bit back. So I've been getting about £4,000 or £5,000 a year for my environmental schemes, costing me £4,000 or £5,000 a year. But with all that goodwill, I was willing to do it. But completely unsupported, and trying to scrape an income out of commercial farming in the sort of landscape we have now. You're not going to feel that sort of that we're all in it together. It's going to be nakedly commercial. And in a demand agricultural system, we won't be able to. What the result will be, by piling the whole lot into environmental schemes, I think it's actually a ruse for saying, well, the farmers are not taking them up, we'll just save it from the budget altogether, because the farmers are not going to be able to take it up, because they're not going to be making a living unless they cut things to the bone. And without making a living, you don't have enough farmers on the land to deliver all this environmental work. So this is, I've been involved in beef policy groups since about 1986. And after 1990, and we always actually advocated paying farmers, but paying them properly with profits from environmental outputs. But the GATT 1993, which is still saved in the WTO agreements, completely preclude that. The government have now found out this. I mean, they set out their stall without doing their homework, which is basically what we can expect of them, and then found out later that they couldn't give us all this money, and so they're not. They want us to do the same schemes really on the cheap, which is what I predicted would happen in the first place, because they've still got to keep within the WTO rules. Otherwise, there's all sorts of consequences. So that's the first thing. So we're losing from an income of around about, from a farm like mine, from an income of about 30 to 35,000, it's going to drop to about 6, 7, 8,000 a year, 10,000 a year at best, if I don't do something different. And the only different thing I can do is diversify and try to run the farming like 1 day a week or 2 days a week. And I can only do, if I'm doing that, I haven't got time to do all this very, very labour intensive work for environmental schemes. Now, the second thing, obviously, It's sectoral and it varies across sectors. It doesn't really affect my sector very much, but you'll have heard a lot about the lack of access to labour. I mean, there's roughly 27,000 EU nationals were working in British agriculture up to the end, up to 2021, up to 2020, and a lot of them stayed on for the first year. In fact, my local strawberry farmer, who's just a couple of miles from here, he's told, I mean, I've spoken to him and he's told me he's still getting enough strawberry pickers because the same ones come back every year. But he'll find very, very soon that next year there'll be, say, 10% of them don't come back. Then the year after that, there'll be another 10%. Other sectors, other fruit growers are finding it difficult already, and they're simply not being able to get enough pickers. There's also a lot of them were working in slaughterhouses, and they've gone home, partly because they don't feel welcome anymore, partly because the economies in places like Poland have probably picked up a little bit and offer more opportunities. But a lot of it is this feeling of unwelcomeness. So we are now those sectors where we need pickers, where we need, or in certain jobs, we now find that we can't get the labour. Now the third thing is these free trade deals, you've all heard about, particularly the Australian and New Zealand ones. The Australia got one which was not allowed a hearing in Parliament after there was a promise that it would be. And the problem with these, now I'm not anti-free trade, but the EU protection, not so much a protection, but there was a protection in terms of standards that the EU was very, very hard on. Like you can have free trade with us only if you produce to our standards. And secondly, there is the fact that we do support the EU did support its farmers through the basic payment scheme, which when there was a glut in another part of the world and the prices crashed, they had something to bottom out their business. That now is going from Britain, and so the trade deals are extremely threatening to UK agriculture. I mean, if we start, particularly if we start lowering standards, and that's already happened. I mean, in the Australia deal, the standards already are negotiated downwards from the Australians don't have to follow the same level of environmental protection, or they can use. I mean, we can still probably ban hormones, but the government in feeds, but the government is not particularly keen. But the other thing is antibiotic use. There is in here we have our own agreements on antibiotic use, which don't apply in the United States, don't apply in Australia, and are really dangerous in terms of the long term. And but they actually do make their production systems a lot cheaper. I mean, we did a study on, for instance, the pig rearing in the United States, and simply on the production systems that are allowed, pig production in the United States is around about 30% cheaper than it is here. Now, without the standards protection, you can't compete and you simply go out of business. So what happens then is it all gets imported. So the standards are a real. I mean, I cut a video of this during the against Brexit campaign that we were running, and I said that farmers face a triple whammy. They face the loss of their subsidies, the loss of their markets, which I actually haven't talked about. Our main export market is the EU, and they face a British government which will open up to imports from all over the world and run a sort of lowest common denominator policy, but without actually lowering the standards in this country. They've got no intention of lowering the standards of which we have to produce to, but only what's allowed to be sold. So we can't possibly compete in this environment. So pretty well everything that I said 6 years ago has come to pass. But being Cassandra is not a happy place to be. So with that, I think we'll. The final thing, yes, the exports to the EU really require an SPS agreement, sanitary phytosanitary agreement with the EU immediately. We also need to align, continue to align on an awful lot of other standards, like we're hiving off the agrochemical side of it. We're moving out of the EU framework which is REACH, which means that we'll have to have another set of legislation. So, and if our crops and what we produce and our animals don't meet the EU standards, we won't be able to export to the EU. Without the SPS agreement, we've got all these border controls, which really is messing up things in Northern Ireland, where across the island of Ireland, the agro-food industry, the downstream side of it, was incredibly integrated. And now every time something has to cross a border, it has to be checked. Now, this is really making a mess of the whole thing, and the government hadn't got anything thought out, but we could have lived with it had there been alignment, a continued alignment. Now, my thoughts, I don't know if you can still hear me, but it's very dead here.
Yeah, we can hear. I can hear you.
That's fine.
Very clear.
So
thank you.
my thoughts, my main thoughts are a lot of these trade deals and the rush to allow stuff in that are produced to standards that we can't, using methods that we're not allowed to use. I think it's basically bridge burning by the Brexiters to make it more and more difficult for us to rejoin the single market in the first instance. Basically, if we've got treaties with Australia and New Zealand, and obviously they have aspirations for the United States, I think there's something going on with Brazil, and this stuff's in our marketplace, then it's going to be impossible for us to rejoin the single market without reneging on the treaties that Liz Truss has been signing over the last year or two. And I think it's deliberate. I think it is a deliberate ploy to make rejoining the single market and rejoining the EU difficult. And that's why they've been in a headlong rush to sign very, very poor deals, which have very, very scant regard for our own farming industry. So that's my bit. I'm happy to take questions. And so over to you, Dave.
So, thanks, Phil. I'm very impressive because you said you didn't do any prep and you were in A&E with the ligament injury. That's very good, Phil. I'm impressed with you there. You told me a lot actually about the payments for these for the farmers, about the payments, because I was a bit confused from a place of ignorance as to why farmers are getting these monies. But the way you've put it is, if you wouldn't get the money, basically I wouldn't get my food and nice environment. So it's very important that you got that.
No, we'd have to farm like the prairies.
Yeah,
we could just about make it pay. I mean, you've got to look at just look at what's been going on in Ukraine. You notice that most of these holdings that the Russians have stolen are like 10,000 hectares, that's 25,000 acres. That's hundreds of square miles, one farm, and they run. And these are real This is really sort of broad. And it's industrial farming in every way. So if you want the family farm to survive, you have to prop it up a little bit. But obviously, what the EU's done over the years has tried to prop it up in the best ways it can. But I know the CAP has had a lot of criticism, and certainly it could have been reformed better, and we tried to reform it better. But it's largely governed by the attempts to make our agricultural support systems WTO compliant. So that has really governed why the CAP is as it is.
If and I dread to have this question, sorry, it's a bit depressing, but if things don't change, where do you see British farming going in the next few years? Will it adapt and survive, or?
Yeah, it'll survive, but different farmers have different survival strategies. I've diversified already, so I can break even and still have an income.
Okay.
But I've got nobody to take over. I'm trying to work out something now with another young farmer who lives nearby, who is about 40 or a bit under 40, 38, 39. And we're working together. But nobody to take over here. And what we're seeing, and the other side of things, is to get really, really, really big. Which is what other farmers are doing. So some are diversifying. I've actually got a district heating scheme running on my straw. Heats houses in the village. So I'm a utility provider. And I've got a very, very large farmhouse. So we have guests living in the farmhouse, and I've got a bed and breakfast unit underway, as well as and also my environmental schemes were a sort of diversification as well. So putting it all together, and I've got a very small EU pension I can live on as well, partly, which they haven't taken off us. But yeah, it'll be either diversified to the extent that the farm is basically a way of spending some of the money you earn in other businesses,
Right, okay.
or getting really, really big. And getting really, really big means taking up that's where most of the land will go. And it is extremely difficult to farm in a big way like that and really start looking at your margins and looking at field margins and bits of clumps of habitat here and there. You can do it on a more macro scale, so that you could say, right, I will take the 50 acres out here and just leave it to itself, and pretend it's not there, a sort of rewilding in a sense, and just farm the rest for hell for leather.
Yeah.
But I think it's really dangerous what's happening as well with the tenant farming. Is becoming extremely difficult because the way that the environmental schemes work really in favour of that sort of approach, whereas landowners can take the whole farm back and rewild it and get carbon credits or something for rewilding it, but kicking the tenant farmer out on the basis of change of use. So I'm even more worried for tenant farmers than owner occupiers.
Scary times, but
yeah,
but we can adapt.
Question.
Sorry, Liz.
Is there any evidence that farmers are changing their mind now and recognising alignment with the EU might be an advantage? And if so, how do we get them on board? Because it's, maybe we're not brave enough to talk to them. My neighbours, dairy farmers,
and they talk to us. Oh, yeah. There's an awful lot of them. There's still quite a lot of hardline Brexiters amongst them, but it's a religion. It isn't a rational, self-interested, rational approach. It's a religion. Now, we also have to remember that the farming vote, although it was painted as being strongly pro-Brexit, it was only about the same as the country as a whole. It was 52-48. And it would have been at least 55-45 Remain had the European Union not decided to not relicense glyphosate 4 weeks before the Brexit vote in 2016. Now, you're probably not aware, but all this business about regenerative farming and things, it's extremely difficult in most circumstances to do it without glyphosate. So farmers had scrapped their ploughs and invested in machinery which only slightly tickled the surface, and then drilled straight in. But you can't drill straight in to a field full of weeds this high, because your crop won't grow. Your crop won't survive against that competition. So that's why so much glyphosate was being used. It was mainly because of this switch away from ploughing, which was done to improve soil organic matter. So I think farmers, having got rid of their ploughs, were being told by the EU that that basically they weren't going to have the other tool that is necessary in that kind of farming environment, where you actually need to have a total herbicide to clear everything before you can do a no-till drill.
Even on my small patch, I can't manage. I don't use it anymore. I've got bottles of the stuff, but I can't get rid of the docks. I've got hundreds of square meters of docks now.
We use Grazon for docks. If you want the grass to survive underneath,
yeah,
spot treat with Grazon. Then you don't need to use much. You just squirt a bit on each dock.
Yeah.
You need your knapsack and just.
Oh yeah, I've got one of those.
Yeah, and but the grass, it doesn't kill the grass. It kills docks, and it'll kill thistles.
Oh, that's
brilliant.
Docks and thistles. Yeah.
Yes, yes. We're even allowed to use it on our margins if we get, if they get taken over by thistles. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the
but
tip.
That's a problem. I mean, and of course they did end up relicensing glyphosate. It was after that scare from the United States, which was not on very good evidence, and there was a thought that also if they ban glyphosate, which is probably the safest chemical we use, they'll ban them all, and then we will have a real food security problem. I mean, I'm all for strict regulation of chemicals, but I don't think it's sensible to, and also to minimise the use of them. But I don't think it's sensible to ban everything outright, because we just end up producing a lot less food, and then if we can't produce the food because we haven't got the tools, we know that there's plenty of rainforest to cut down in Brazil, and they'd be willing to do it for us.
So how are they getting on in France? Because they banned it there, despite the.
I know. Yeah, well,
they banned all the others too.
Yeah, well, the obvious thing is to reinvest in your plough, buy another plough, and all that organic matter you've built up over the last 10 or 15 years by surface tilling or no-till. Immediately you plough it, it oxidizes, and all that carbon dioxide goes back into the atmosphere.
So it's a balance. There's no perfect solution.
There isn't. Right. Yeah, it's right. Everything you try to do to improve the environment in farming has a negative consequence somewhere else. So it's really, really difficult. It's something that we're absolutely 100% committed to, but it's never simple. And there are ways, like this regenerative farming is working quite well, and you can reduce. Well, if it doesn't work on all soils though. But we keep trying different things so that hopefully it might work better. Different things might work. But what we have found, if you can get the soil organic matter up a little bit, the nitrogen use efficiency is better because it holds it there, and you can get the same yields you can cut nitrogen inputs by 25–30%, and get the same yields. Now this is all research that's still going on at the moment, and that's got to be good, because of course nitrous oxide is one of the worst greenhouse gases, and actually, we produce nitrogen fertilizers from gas. So we don't have to. We can use green hydrogen, which is where I think we should be pushing nitrogen. I think for nitrogen fertilizer, it should be made now from green hydrogen, but that means we need an awful lot of solar panels in the desert to produce the green hydrogen, produce the green nitrogen.
That's a very interesting. Thanks, Phil. Very interesting. I'm not sure we've got time for the questions because.
Sorry, I've gone on.
No. It's fine. It was interesting.
There's a lot of farmers now. There's an awful lot of farmers saying they'll never vote Conservative again.
Wow.
Good.
a lot. I know that this is non-party political, and you know there are Conservatives I know that are still Conservatives that are very, very pro-European. And you know, for some of them, they're better off staying in the Conservative Party to try and bring it round.
I can see that.
Not all of them. I welcome defectors, but largely, I mean, it's largely a management thing. They think that they see that the government, the Conservative government, has mismanaged Brexit. It's mismanaged. It's mismanaging the economy now. They just have, and particularly with the trade deals, they think they've been stabbed in the back. So it's and a lot of managerial classes I'm finding as well that used to always vote that way. A lot of people, particularly people who are chief executives, you know, people who are up top, high level management. Again, they're not political people, but they're managerial. But they've gone completely away from the Conservatives on the basis of incompetent management of the British economy. Well, and most of those people, of course, are very pro EU and were very, very strong Remainers, even though they are not party political and not really very political people.
Well, this government isn't Conservative. It's not what we.
No, it's not. No, it's not. You're right. No, it's radical. Actually, it's quite the opposite. It's radical, which is, if anything, the opposite of Conservative.
Yeah. I think that's quite interesting because, and it's quite depressing what you've told us, but it is really interesting from sort of a layperson's point of view. But the farmers are so important to this country. There must be some way that we can influence, that farmers can influence the government and to actually admit the truth about what's going on, because they're deceiving the public, as far as I'm concerned, totally deceiving people about the state of things, the state of food production, everything. I think that, you know, there will be such a powerful force. Because it's so basic, isn't it? Putting food on the table, you know.
Yeah. We've got to leaf out of the French farmers book.
Pardon?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe.
The French farmers take the tractors to.
Oh yes. Yeah, I got caught up in one of those once in a place called Douai when they were burning bales in the street, and the middle roundabout in the middle of the town, they filled with potatoes, and there was fires everywhere, and but no, I mean it's I mean, we're doing the best we can. I mean, we've grabbed 2 agricultural constituencies off the Conservatives, which you'd think would make them start to look at themselves.
It'll take time, I guess. Yeah.
But that's what we've got to do.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think the government's got to be called out for the lies it's telling or what it's not telling people about the situation, because it's pretty dire, isn't it? Let's face it, without, you know, over-egging it.
Yeah, I mean, I will warn you that when we get the agricultural income results out next year, there'll be massive profits for farming. Because, but then the year after, they won't.
Right.
The Ukrainian war has caused this situation. Commodity prices have gone through the roof. Fertilizer prices have tripled. But we bought our fertilizer before the war broke out. So we bought our fertilizer at £240 a tonne. and when wheat was it was £200 a ton. Wheat went up to £300 a ton, and so we've sold we're selling this harvest we've just completed at much higher prices, but the input costs were roughly the same at the time we grew the crop. The input costs now for the crop we're putting in are massively higher. So come next year, and actually the wheat prices are dropping. So it'll be just a phase. It'll just be a lag phase. So the government will probably start trumpeting this out when we get very high farm income data come next year. But it's entirely because all the prices went up at the same time, despite the fact that we'd already used with farming, you reap 18 months after you sow, really, because even though you reap 9 months after or 10 months after you sow, by the time you sell it, it's 18 months after.
Yeah.
And
big delay.
when the war sorts itself out, it'll be the opposite, because the wheat prices will crash right down to maybe 150, 160, but the fertilizer prices now, they'll end up from £250 a ton to 1,000.
So a lot coming. I suppose, like with anything, there's always delayed impact. We're all gonna have to move on, I think, because we're getting slightly behind.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine. We invited you to speak, and you spoke, which is good. So thank you.
So, for instance, organic agriculture. I'm quite involved in organic agriculture. We are now not able to ship organic produce to UK certified organic produce to the European Union is very, very difficult now. Whereas 3 years ago, there was absolutely no issue.
Interesting. Could you, if you don't mind reaching out to me, Jeremy, could you send me some information on that? Because I don't think people might be aware that people are trying to eat better, aren't they? And organic comes into that. And obviously, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, I mean, we have no. If we recognise the European certifications, then we have no issue in importing it, so we can eat it. But our exporters, our farmers, will be finding more and more difficulty in this, as in everything else. So I went to the the major organic trade fair for food and drink in Nuremberg 3 weeks ago, the Kosovan stand was bigger and better than the British stand. And,
wow.
You know, okay, it was held in Germany, but Nordrhein-Westfalen, one region of Germany, had about 8 times as much space advertising. And don't forget, this is an international fair for international buyers. This is not just a German thing or a European thing. Had 8 times as much space as the British thing. And the British thing, basically, it had Suma Whole Foods, who you expect being one of the oldest organic producers, and 1 or 2 others. But it was basically Britain didn't even bother. As far as I was very, very disappointed. And when I talked to various continental companies, they said we hardly bother with the British market now because it is so difficult to get stuff in. And if it's so difficult to get in, it's even harder for us to get it into them.
Wow.
And you may say that's only a small thing and it's not particularly important, but actually, if you look at the percentage of organic produce, both grown and consumed across Europe, it's expanding rapidly, and the UK is falling well behind on that. And it's a premium market that brings in better. Often, I mean, it's got its problems. It's not perfect at all, but it tends to bring in more money for the producers than conventional. That's just one example.
Probably symptomatic of what's happening everywhere, isn't it? No, if only we were told the truth. Yeah.